Mudavadi ajipata njia panda kwa kusukumiwa maswali motomoto bungeni. Hii inafuatia uhusiano mbaya baina ya Kenya na Marekani. Hebu tumsikize anavyopashwa na kujibu maswali kutoka kwa wabunge.
How do we deal with the tea farmer in Kangaita tea factory in Kirinyaga, where he comes from? A very nice factory that I have visited personally. Yeah, you have all those tea factories in Kenya. Smallholder tea factories, KTDA, 69 or 79 tea factories, dotted all over the country. They produce tea, smallholder tea. As a responsible government, we must find markets for our tea farmers. We have to sell our tea. We have to sell our coffee. We have to sell our flowers. So we have to look for markets globally. That is why we signed the EPA, the European Economic Partnership Agreement. That is why we signed SEPA with the United Arab Emirates. That is why we have the East African Community as an economic bloc. That's why we are members of MPESA. That is why we are talking of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Because in all this, we are trying to broaden scope and markets for our farmers and our manufacturers. In 2020, the exports to the East African community were 64.3% of the exports to Africa. And this figure has been growing to the extent that our exports to Africa, to the East African countries, now constitute 75.5% of our exports to Africa. Therefore, the East African community is an extremely important economic bloc for us. And therefore, we need to understand, if I may go a little bit political and digress a little, that even if there are issues, we must solve them diplomatically. We cannot go any other route. And we must also understand that we cannot go and ruffle the feathers of our neighbors. Because how many families are dependent on these numbers? Very many families, millions of people. So we cannot afford to antagonize our neighbors. If there are issues, we have to resolve them quickly, but diplomatically. There is a word called xenophobia. We all know what it means. It can be very destructive. And I want us as Kenya to play a leading role in fostering, and I'm appealing to you, in fostering that Africanhood and the integration of our nations. It's absolutely important. We have seen in some countries what xenophobia, it starts small and it grows and it becomes a big problem in countries. We saw what happened in the South when people developed certain attitudes. It can be costly. We have seen situations where in some countries, people are now being pushed away not to get medical treatment. Mothers with children are being turned away from hospitals because of this creature called xenophobia. Why are we engaging in bilateral conversations with the United States? Because AGOA is coming to an end. And AGOA was a policy position or incentive given by the United States to all African countries, not specific to Kenya. It is to all African countries. So if the American government is not renewing the AGOA framework for all African countries, then each country must engage in a bilateral conversation. So Kenya has already taken up its role. I've been to the Trade Department. The Minister for Trade is in conversation, and we are working also through our mission on this matter so that we can tackle the issues around trade between us and the US and Kenya relations. We have good relations with the United States. There is no challenge whatsoever, and we are not downplaying the challenges that may come up once in a while. First of all, please, Madam Chair, let it be on record that it is not the government of the United States that has raised an issue. It's not the executive. It is a motion coming from a member of Senate, not the United States government. So this needs to be put on record, and I think even for our media, please capture this appropriately, because there's misrepresentation on some issues around this. As I sit, I was recently in the United States. I had a session with the Secretary of State on bilateral matters, Rubio. And there are so many issues, even as we speak, a conversation is going on between us and the government of the United States on how to deal with the issue of the tariff challenges that are all over. And for your information, out of the tariff structures, Kenya is one of the beneficiaries of the lowest tariff bans from the United States. We are at 10% tariff ban. You just need to go to the media and you'll find that there are some other African countries or other countries globally that are being hit by higher tariffs. Okay. And that is a policy direction that is being taken from the United States, not from Kenya. So we should not have an exaggeration on this on the issue of Sudan, because this is important. The warring parties must eliminate the notion that it will be a military solution. The issue in Sudan is not going to be solved through a military solution. The protagonists must go to the negotiating table. We don't even have a common border with Sudan. My dear Kenyans, we don't even have a common border with Sudan. So, let the warring parties sort themselves out. Kenya has a history. When South Sudan was in conflict, the agreement, comprehensive peace agreement, was signed in Kenya. Kenya hosted different South Sudanese people, and they signed the agreement here at Nyayo Stadium. Kenya continues to be involved in peace processes, whether it is Tumaini Initiative and others, to help South Sudan. Yesterday I met the ambassador of South Sudan, and we were talking about the road through Lodwar all the way into South Sudan, through the Turkana County. as a critical infrastructure to help our two communities, that is South Sudan and Kenya. LAPSET, Ethiopia has processed 60,000 metric tons of fertilizer through Lamu and taken it to Ethiopia. So LAPSET is a giant waiting to explode to its full potential. But apart from that, working with the World Bank, if we took time and we went, you will see that the process of now doing the road network from LAPSET going into Garispi to the north towards the border in Ethiopia is work in progress, supported by the World Bank to open up those areas and to increase the potential of Lamu as a port. So there's a good opportunity being developed. I hope that answers a bit of that question around LAPSET. On the UN, there's work in progress. The UN passed its budget. They have made a decision in New York that they're going to expand the facilities around Gigiri, 140 acres of land, and have more offices and other issues to the tune of about over $350 million. So that by the time they are through, the Gigiri Center should be able to host a general assembly. The way people go for UNGA in New York, the way they go for big meetings in Geneva. In a few years' time, you can be able to have a general assembly in Kenya. And all the ministries around infrastructure and we are working very closely together. When you see the road network around that place, you can see it's improving. We are looking at completing the various bypasses. We are looking at investing further in the Nairobi Railway City, so that the whole issue of commuter transport within the city and the environment can improve. So there's work in progress. We also have committees of foreign affairs and others also working on the legal framework as we speak, so that the powers and the Privileges and Immunities Act can be relooked at afresh, bearing in mind that we are going to have massive movement of people. This issue around boundaries always takes a lot of time and it requires a lot of process, because after you have come to it, you must also file those instruments with the United Nations to make sure that they are properly accepted and done in accordance with international law before you can say that this is the final position. So it's a long journey, and resources depend on how Parliament allocates resources for that function. So today Kenya may allocate resources, but the Tanzanian side has delayed, or the Ugandan side has delayed. Now you cannot have a one-sided process, because they will say we don't recognize your results because you are not party to the process. So it has to be a combination of diplomacy and moving forward. But I want to appeal to members. Kenya is the largest economy in the region. On these trade numbers that I've given you, which you look at, Kenya is the one that is earning more in terms of revenue from all the trade in the region compared to the other countries. what does that mean? Okay, so we need to interrogate those numbers. What does it mean? Okay, Kenya is not in any way involved in any hostile activities with any of its neighbors or any other African country. There's a lot of this talk in the papers, but we are not involved, and we've said it several times. I've attended the peace meetings in Paris on Sudan. I've attended the peace meetings in London on Sudan. Kenya continues to participate in humanitarian activities of Kenyans in Sudan through organizations like World Food Program and others. And we've lost some lives of Kenyans in that place. And I think it should also go on record that when the conflict hit its worst in the beginning, Kenya evacuated so many people from Sudan, and they are here. Kenya has facilitated those people, including not just Sudanese people, but also other UN staff and other people. They came here. As a rescue mission, the Kenyan flights went there. Even when they had lost their documents, the Kenyan government facilitated and brought these people here to keep them. There are some issues that some of us are also surprised about. Because when all is said and done, Kenya is a sovereign state. So Kenya will have its friends. And for whatever it is worth, the principle of sovereignty must be upheld and respected by all nations. But for your information, President Ruto has not made any trip to Russia. Neither has he made a trip to Iran. Neither have I made a trip to Russia or to Iran. Just as an example, to show you how sometimes some issues can be very skewed. So on what basis do you come to a conclusion and say that we want to monitor the relationship between one country and another? We have no challenge whatsoever in working with America. We will be penning off a letter to my counterpart, Foreign Affairs Minister, who doubles up as the East African Community Minister, outlining the implications, which are now in the document I've shared with you, to our business people, and telling them to look at that afresh so that we can resolve this amicably and avoid what we might call retaliation measures. We don't want to go there at this point in time. But what is clear is that we are pushing, and the value of the economic bloc is so important to us. And it's only clear that we keep on working at it. It must be work in progress at all times to make sure that this economic bloc functions smoothly.
Nikiripotia Washy TV, jina langu ni Washington Mwange, na kama huja subscribe, tafadhali naomba tusupport kwa kusubscribe pale YouTube Washy TV Kenya, subscribe na utakuwa wa kwanza kupata habari zinapochipuka. Pia tufuatilie kwenye social media nyingine zote Washy TV Kenya, pale Facebook, pale TikTok, pale Instagram, tufuatilie pale, na tunashukuru kwa kuwa mtazamaji bora. Hadi wakati mwingine, jina langu ni Washington Mwange.